bloody battle on the Plains of Abraham in 1759 started a spiral effect that resulted in France losing the vast majority of its land ownership in North America. Hi, I'm Rebecca Brayton and welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be learning more about the battle for Quebec and its significance in the course of world history. Tell us about death or victory. What moment in history are you focusing on?
So Death or Victory focuses on this incredible climactic battle during the 7 Years' War, or the French-Indian War as it's sometimes called, in North America in the 1750s and early 1760s. So France was really the dominant territorial power in North America, and this war, this battle, helped turn that round, and Britain conquered North America.
What makes Quebec so important strategically?
Aboriginal word Quebec means the Narrows. It's where the St. Lawrence goes from being a giant river to just being less than a mile wide. So it's this bottleneck, and if you want to access the continent of North America, you've got to go through Quebec, you've got to go up the St. Lawrence, and you get to the Great Lakes, and you get to the great river systems. And so Quebec is the gatekeeper of North America.
What were some of the biggest challenges faced during this conflict?
These British redcoats would come with their thick woolen redcoats, and they didn't know. One minute it was boiling hot, it was almost 40 degrees centigrade. The next minute it would be thunderstorms that would drench them, and there was terrible disease. As a result, there was flooding within the camp, and the latrines would overflow, and the water would get polluted. So the British really struggled. The cliffs meant that Quebec was very well defended from the British forces. The British really struggled to get at Quebec. It was only very late in September they managed to capture Quebec. They were ready to call it a disaster. They were going to retreat right back up the river, go back to Halifax and Boston, and say we failed. And they had one last gamble, one last throw of the dice, and they managed to capture Quebec.
Tell us about some of the most important characters, the most important players in this event.
The great thing is it's an important story. It's also full of hysterical and funny characters and with weird neuroses and stuff. So the commander on the British side was called General Wolfe, General James Wolfe. He'd never commanded an army before, so he was 32 years old, and the British thought it was a good idea to give him command of this army and send him on this incredibly dangerous expedition, 1,000 miles into enemy territory. No British fleet had managed to get up the St. Lawrence River for hundreds of years. He was a bit nervous, he was a bit sickly. He fell out with his officers, they didn't like each other. At the end of the summer, he'd pretty much failed to capture Quebec. He wrote a letter to his mum, and he said, "Mum, I'm coming home, and I'm going to resign, I'm going to leave the army." So he's a broken man, but he said, "I'll have one last gamble, I'll throw the dice one more time before I leave." The French soldiers were commanded by a guy called the Marquis de Montcalm, who hated being in Canada. He missed his family. Just before the battle, he was told one of his beloved daughters had died in the south of France, so he was depressed, he was sad about that. He fell out with the French commanders here, the sort of French Canadians here. They hated each other, they couldn't even be in the same room as each other. So it's a really strange campaign. Everyone seemed to dislike each other very much. And it's just fascinating personalities.
Tell us about the fates of Wolfe and Montcalm.
In the battle outside Quebec on the 13th September 1759, General Wolfe, he was very brave. He was a sort of strange man, but he was particularly brave. He led by example, and he made his men lie down to protect them from the Canadians. The French Canadians were incredibly effective sharpshooters. They were sniping and they were killing lots of British soldiers. He made his men lie down. But he walked up and down to show how brave he was. He was in charge, so he could stay cool. And he was injured in the wrist, and he bound up. He said, "It's nothing." Then a bullet scraped his stomach, and it gave him a bad injury. And then 2 bullets thumped into his chest, and he died minutes later. He died just in time to hear that the French were running off the battlefield. Just in time to hear that he'd won the battle. Montcalm was injured going back into Quebec. He was a popular commander, and they said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Don't worry, friends, I'm fine." And he died after a terrible night, agonizing pain. He died after a night in Quebec, and he was buried in a shell hole a British shell had left in the ground.
I've seen you call this one of the most decisive encounters in history. Why?
I think the summer, the fighting over the summer, and the capture of Montreal the next year, 1760, is very decisive because it determines that North America would be largely British-speaking and embrace British ideas of law and politics and trade and industry. If North America had remained carved up, some French, some Spanish, some British, these two great powers, Canada and America, would not have emerged. And I think that the 20th century might have been very different.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.